My name is Spencer. Before you listen to my story, before you decide if I'm the hero or the villain, I need you to do me a favor. If anything I say for the next couple of hours resonates with you, if you've ever poured your soul into something just to have it handed to someone else, I need you to hit that like button and let me know in the comments. It's a small thing, but it helps to know you're not just screaming into the void. It helps to know you're not alone. The air in the atrium of Montgomery Sterling architecture was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and self-congratulation. It was the kind of smell you only get when money and ego collide at high velocity. For 2 years, this building had been my life, my cathedral, and my prison. I had practically lived in my small glass-walled office in the back, a space they called the design lab, but was really just a glorified closet with a good computer. From that closet, I had spun gold. I had designed the Aura home, a revolutionary modular eco-home that was set to redefine sustainable living. It was my baby, born from thousands of hours of obsessive sketching, 3D modeling, and material science research that no one else in the firm even understood. My father, a man whose name was literally carved into the granite facade of the building, was Alistair Montgomery. He was a titan of the old guard, a man who believed architecture was about legacy, stone, and steel. My designs, lightweight, sustainable, built with a patented interlocking system I invented from scratch, were anathema to him until he saw the profit potential. He'd made me a promise, a simple covenant between a father and a son. He'd looked me in the eye over a schematic of the Aura's core power grid, his hand on my shoulder, a rare moment of connection. His words were gravelly and certain. "Spencer, you bring this home, you secure the funding, and you will lead this project. It will be your name on the masthead. Your legacy," and I did it. I brought it home. The Viridian Global contract was the white whale of the industry, a multi-billion-dollar initiative to build entire communities of sustainable housing. Winning it wasn't just a success, it was an ascension. It was the single biggest contract in the firm's 70-year history. Tonight was the celebration. I stood near the back, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching my father take the stage. He was a lion in a bespoke suit, his silver hair catching the spotlights. He commanded the room without effort. I felt a tremor of pride, a foolish, boyish hope that this was it. This was the moment my life would pivot. I could feel the weight of my father's promise about to be fulfilled. He began his speech, his voice booming through the speakers. He thanked the board. He thanked the clients. He spoke of a new era for Montgomery Sterling. Then he said it. "And to lead us into this bold new future, to head the Viridian project, I am appointing a man with the vision, the connections, and the management pedigree to see it through." My heart swelled. This was it. My father paused for dramatic effect, his eyes sweeping the room. They passed right over me, not even a flicker of recognition. He smiled, a wide, predatory grin. "Please join me in congratulating the new head of our advanced housing division, my son Hayes Montgomery." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs. The sound in the room seemed to warp, the applause turning into a dull, roaring wave. Hayes, my brother. My older brother, who had an MBA from a school his trust fund paid for, and whose architectural knowledge could be summarized on a cocktail napkin. Hayes, who called my sustainable material prototypes fancy mud bricks. Hayes, who had spent the last 2 years closing ski lift deals in Aspen, while I was developing the very soul of this project. The room erupted. People were turning to shake Hayes's hand as he made his way to the stage, preening under the lights. I was frozen. A statue in a suit. Then, as if to twist the knife, my father added the final, gutting detail. He put a hand on Hayes's shoulder, the same way he had put it on mine over the schematics. He said, "Hayes has the management pedigree to steer this ship, and of course, he'll be supported by our many talented designers, like his brother Spencer, who did such a wonderful job on the initial concepts." A talented designer, just a talented designer. 2 years of my life, my intellectual and emotional capital, my very soul poured into a project, and I was reduced to a footnote in my own story, a supporting character in the triumph I had authored. The applause was a physical assault. My knuckles went white around my glass. I could feel the quiet heat flush up my neck, the kind of deep internal burn that no one else can see. What my father didn't know What no one in that room of cheering sycophants knew was that my work wasn't just a concept, it wasn't just a collection of pretty drawings. The core interlocking system that made the modular design possible, the proprietary blend of mycelium and recycled composites that made the materials both sustainable and incredibly strong, they weren't the property of Montgomery Sterling architecture, they were mine. 6 months ago, a seed of doubt planted by my old mentor had bloomed into a quiet, paranoid foresight. I had taken my savings, hired my own patent attorney, and filed everything. The interlocking mechanism, the material composition, the energy-efficient ventilation cycle. I had personally filed and secured the patents under my own name, through a shell LLC I'd created for a few $100s. The official certificates were sitting in a fireproof safe in my apartment. They could have the client, they could have the contract, they could stand on that stage and bask in the glow of a victory they hadn't earned, but they couldn't build my design, they couldn't lay a single foundation or connect a single module without me, not without paying me royalties that would make their eyes water and giving me the credit I was owed, or I would see them in court for patent infringement, and I would burn their legacy to the ground with the truth. In that moment, standing in the shadow of my brother's unearned glory, a cold, crystalline calm settled over the fire in my gut. This wasn't a defeat, it was a declaration of war. They just didn't know it yet. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself. Though the thought was a sweet, dark nectar, it was about justice. It was about the simple, undeniable fact that you cannot build a house on a foundation that you do not own. And the foundation of the Aura home had my name carved into its very soul. The drive home from the party was a blur of street lights and hollow silence. The city, usually a vibrant tapestry of noise and light, felt muted, as if the world had been wrapped in gauze. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, minimalist, clean, almost sterile. It was a space designed for function, not comfort, a place to recharge before the next long day at the design lab. The irony was suffocating. I, who had designed homes meant to foster community, warmth, and connection to the earth, lived in a white box in the sky that felt like a high-end morgue. I dropped my keys on the granite countertop, the clatter echoing in the stillness. For a moment, I just stood there in the dark, my suit feeling like a costume. The applause from the party was still ringing in my ears, a phantom jeer. Then the dam broke. It wasn't a loud, theatrical breakdown. It was a quiet, internal collapse. I leaned against the cold stone of the counter, my head bowed, and the full weight of the betrayal crashed down on me. It wasn't just the project. It wasn't just the promotion, it was the casual public erasure of my existence by my own father, a talented designer. The words circled in my head like vultures. It was the ultimate dismissal, a pat on the head to the child who does a good crayon drawing while the adults talk business. 2 years, 24 months of my life, 70-hour weeks, canceled plans, missed weddings, a relationship that had withered and died from neglect because I was always at the office, chasing a ghost. I was chasing his approval, Alistair Montgomery's approval. A nod, a word, a sign that I was more than just the artistic son, the quiet one who wasn't a natural leader like Hayes. My mind, a machine trained to see structure and stress points, started replaying the past, searching for the cracks in the foundation I had missed. I remembered a dinner, maybe a year and a half ago. I had just solved a critical engineering flaw in the Aura's water reclamation system. I was buzzing with it, trying to explain the elegance of the solution to my father. He'd listened with half an ear, his gaze distant. Hayes was there, fresh off a plane from some resort negotiation, and he'd launched into a story about schmoozing a client on a golf course. My father had lit up. He'd turned his full attention to Hayes, laughing, clapping him on the back. "That's my boy," he'd said. "He knows people are the real architecture." I had felt myself shrink in that moment, my groundbreaking work turning to ash in my mouth. I see it now. He was never going to give it to me. The promise was just a tool, a motivator to get the donkey to pull the cart. I was the donkey. The despair was a physical thing, a heavy blanket that threatened to suffocate me. I slid down the kitchen island until I was sitting on the cold tile floor, the darkness of the apartment a welcome shroud. What was I even fighting for? What was the point? I could sue them, yes. I had the patents. I could create a mess, a scandal, but what would that achieve? It would tear my family apart, a family that was already a fractured, hollow thing. It would confirm my father's narrative that I was difficult, not a team player, a volatile artist, not a stable leader. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just a designer. And then a different memory starts cutting through the fog of self-pity. It was from 3 years ago, before the Aura project even began. I was visiting Arthur Abeyance, the firm's former head of engineering, at his home in the countryside. Arthur had retired a decade prior, a legend who had been forced out by the new guard, my father included, because he was considered too meticulous, too slow, too much of an old-school craftsman in a world of cut-and-paste commercialism. He was my mentor, the one who had seen my potential when I was just an intern. We were in his workshop, a magnificent old barn, filled with the smell of sawdust and oiled steel. It was a sanctuary of real work. I was lamenting my place at the firm, feeling like my ideas about sustainable materials were being ignored. Arthur was sharpening a chisel on a whetstone, his movements slow and deliberate. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He said, "Spencer, your father is a fine salesman. He sells visions. He sells legacy. But he doesn't build things. He gets others to build them for him. Men like Hayes, they're cut from the same cloth. They sell. Men like you, men like me, we build. There's no shame in it. But you must understand the difference. A salesman will always value another salesman over a builder because he doesn't understand what the builder does. He just knows he needs the final product to sell." He'd finished sharpening the chisel, testing the edge with his thumb. Then he looked at me, his eyes clear and sharp. "So if you ever build something truly special, something that comes from your gut, don't just give it to the salesman. You document it, you protect it, you own it. Because the day will come when they need it, and they will tell you it's for the good of the company, for the good of the family. But what they really mean is that it's for the good of themselves." That conversation was the seed. That was the moment the idea of self-protection had been planted. It wasn't about paranoia then, it was about principle. Arthur's words had been the catalyst. A few months later, when the first real breakthroughs on the Aura's interlocking system happened, I remembered his advice. I started documenting everything, keeping a separate logbook at home. When the sustainable composite formula was perfected, I didn't just save the file on the company server, I saved it on an encrypted drive that I kept in my fireproof safe. The memory of Arthur's workshop, of his steady, certain voice, acted like a bracing slap in the face. I was sitting on the floor of my sterile apartment, wallowing in the dark, but Arthur wouldn't wallow, he would act. He would see this not as a betrayal, but as a predictable outcome, a data point confirming a hypothesis. The salesman had undervalued the builder. It was the natural order of his world. My phone, which had been silent on the counter, buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again. I finally reached up and grabbed it, expecting a placating text from my mother or a gloating one from Hayes. But it wasn't either of them. It was an unknown number. The message was short, 5 words that changed everything. "Heard what happened. Call me." There was no signature, but I knew who it was from. It was Arthur. He must have heard through the grapevine of retired architects, a network more potent than any social media. Staring at those 5 words, the fog in my head began to clear. The self-pity started to recede, replaced by something cold and hard and sharp, like the edge of Arthur's freshly sharpened chisel. He hadn't said, "I'm sorry." He hadn't offered condolences. He'd said, "Call me." It was a summons. It was a prompt for action. I pushed myself up off the floor. The chill from the tiles had seeped into my bones, but it felt different now. It wasn't the cold of despair, it was the cold of resolve. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window and looked out at the city lights. They weren't a blur anymore. They were a grid, a network of possibilities. My father had called me a talented designer. He was right. I designed things. And now I was going to design his downfall. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. It was about recalibrating the world to reflect reality, my reality. I unlocked my phone and dialed the number. Arthur picked up on the first ring, his voice a low rumble. So he said, without preamble, "What are you going to do about it, son?" A small, humorless smile touched my lips. "I'm glad you called, Arthur. I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. I think I'm going to need a good lawyer and a new workshop. The plan wasn't born in a moment of vengeful rage. It was constructed piece by piece, over 6 months of quiet evenings, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of premonition. It began as a simple act of self-preservation, a shield, but it slowly morphed into a sword I never intended to unsheath. Now sitting in my apartment after that phone call with Arthur, I was methodically laying that sword on the table, examining its edge. The first piece was the legal fortress. Arthur's recommendation for a lawyer wasn't some high-powered corporate shark from a downtown firm. It was a woman named Evelyn Reed, a specialist in intellectual property law, who operated out of a small, unassuming office that smelled of old books and fresh brewed tea. Arthur had described her as a giant killer. He said she speaks softly and carries a very, very big lawsuit. I had met with her 6 months ago, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and audacity. I'd laid out my designs, my logbooks, my chemical formulas. I explained my position as the son of the firm's owner, the delicate and toxic family dynamic. I expected her to be skeptical. Instead, she had listened with an unnerving stillness, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I finished, she'd looked at the schematics for my interlocking system, not as an architect, but as a strategist. She traced the lines with her finger. Is this system integral to the design? She asked. Not just helpful, but integral. It's the backbone, I'd replied. Without it, the modularity fails. The cost balloons by 40%, and the construction time triples. It's the whole ballgame, and the sustainable composite, the material you call mycocretes. That's the skin and bones, I said. It's what makes it eco-friendly, fire-resistant, and cheap to produce. It's the secret sauce that won us the Viridian global pitch. She had nodded slowly, a faint smile on her lips. Good, she'd said. It's one thing to own the decorative shutters, Mr. Montgomery. It's another thing entirely to own the foundation and the walls. She then walked me through the process, the costs, the sheer mind-numbing volume of paperwork required to file utility patents. She explained the importance of creating a separate legal entity, a firewall between me, Spencer Montgomery the employee, and me, Spencer Montgomery the inventor. We created an LLC that day, Nexus Innovations, a simple, clean name that existed only on paper, a ghost in the machine waiting for a purpose. For the next 3 months, I bled my personal savings into Evelyn's trust account, funding the exhaustive patent search and application process. It was a massive gamble, a bet on my own potential betrayal. When the official patent grant notices arrived from the USPTO, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a profound sense of relief, the way you feel when you install a fire extinguisher you hope you'll never have to use. The second piece of the plan was the network. My primary ally, Arthur, was more than just a mentor. He was a living archive of the industry's history and secrets. After our call, we met the next morning at a greasy spoon diner halfway between the city and his country home. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were still fiercely intelligent. He sketched on a napkin as we talked, not architectural designs, but a web of influence. Your father and his board, they think the world runs on contracts and capital, he said, pushing a salt shaker to represent the firm. But it doesn't. It runs on trust. It runs on the word of people who know how to build things. He started placing other shakers, sugar dispensers, and spoons around the napkin. This is Eleanor Vance at Viridian. I knew her father. He was a steel man, tough as nails but fair. She's the same. She doesn't suffer fools or bullshit artists. This one here, this is Kenji Tanaka at a competing firm, Sterling's biggest rival. I consulted for him a few years ago. He values talent above all else. And these, he said, tapping a row of spoons, are the suppliers, the best ones. The ones who provide the raw materials for your mycocrete. They've been loyal to me for 30 years. Their loyalty is to the craftsman, not the purchase order. He was giving me a map, a new blueprint. He was showing me that the power I thought was consolidated in my father's gleaming tower was actually distributed, a network of relationships I had the ability to tap into. But there was another ally, one I hadn't expected. Maria, a junior architect at the firm, had been my right hand on the Aura project. She was young, brilliant, and fiercely passionate about the sustainable vision. She had done much of the thankless grunt work, the late-night rendering, the cross-referencing of material specs. The night of the party, she had sent me a simple text, "This is wrong." The day after my meeting with Arthur, I asked her to meet me for coffee. Her eyes were full of a weary anger. "They gave him my datasheets," she said, her voice a low hiss. "Hayes." He asked me for a one-page summary of the project's key value propositions. He didn't even know the name of the ventilation system. He called it the breathing thingy. She was insulted not just for me but for the work itself. "I need a favor, Maria," I said, my voice low. "I don't want you to steal anything, or break any rules. I just need you to be my eyes and ears. I need to know how they plan to build this thing without the blueprints." She looked at me, a long searching gaze. Then she gave a single sharp nod. "They can't," she said, "and they're going to find that out the hard way." Her loyalty wasn't just a comfort, it was a strategic asset. She was my insider, my mole, my private window into the chaos that was about to unfold. The third and final piece of the plan was the leverage itself, and understanding its true nature. The patents weren't just legal documents, they were the keys to the kingdom. Over the next few days, I didn't go into the office. I took a few official sick days, my phone blowing up with calls from my father, my mother, even Hayes, all of which I ignored. I wasn't hiding, I was preparing. I sat in my apartment with Evelyn Reed and Arthur Vance, my coffee table covered in documents. We weren't just planning a lawsuit, we were planning a corporate decapitation. Evelyn laid out the legal strategy. We wouldn't start with a cease and desist. That was too predictable. It would give them time to prepare a PR response, to paint me as a disgruntled employee. No, our first move would be quieter, more precise. It would be a simple formal notification of patent ownership, sent directly to the board of directors, my father, Hayes, and most importantly to the legal department at Viridian Global. "The notification to Viridian is the kill shot," Evelyn explained, her tone surgical. "Their contract with Montgomery Sterling is predicated on the delivery of a specific proprietary technology. The moment they are officially notified that the firm does not possess the legal right to use that technology, the firm is in material breach of contract. It gives Viridian the legal standing to terminate the agreement immediately and without penalty." Arthur, meanwhile, was focused on the operational fallout. "They'll try to reverse engineer it," he grumbled. "Hayes will hire some hotshot engineers to try and replicate your work." I shook my head. "They can try, but they won't be able to. The mycocrete formula isn't just a list of ingredients, it's a process. The curing times, the temperature controls, the specific fungal strain which I sourced from a remote valley in Norway and have the sole supplier contract for, it would take them years and millions in R&D to even get close. And the interlocking system, I pulled up the 3D model on my laptop. I showed them the hidden genius of it, a small, almost invisible detail in the load-bearing joint. I'd designed a deliberate subtle flaw in all the versions stored on the company server, a micro-fracture point that would appear under stress testing, a deliberate weak link that only I knew how to fix in the final production files. "The files on my encrypted drive, it's a Trojan horse," I explained. "If they build from the firm's schematics, the first prototype will fail catastrophically." Arthur stared at the screen, and for the first time, a slow, wide grin spread across his face. He looked at me, then at Evelyn. "The boy isn't just a builder," he said with a chuckle. "He's a goddamn demolitions expert." In that room, surrounded by my silent weapons, the patents, the allies, the hidden flaws, I finally understood the nature of my own power. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was quiet, structural, and absolute. My father and brother had stolen the spotlight, the title, the glory. They had left me with nothing but the work itself. They had made a critical, arrogant mistake. They thought the work was just a stepping stone to the prize. They didn't understand that the work was the prize. It was the whole damn thing. My resolve hardened, no longer hot with anger, but cold and clear as glass. It wasn't about revenge. It was about demonstrating, in the most undeniable terms possible, the difference between talking about building something and actually knowing how it's built. The first move wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a single, silent keystroke. On Monday morning, 1 week after the disastrous party, I sat at my desk at home, a cup of coffee steaming beside me. I had drafted the email with Evelyn. It was a masterpiece of cold corporate legalese, stripped of all emotion. It was addressed to the entire board of Montgomery Sterling, to my father, to Hayes, and crucially, to the general counsel of Viridian Global, whose email address Arthur had quietly procured for me. The subject line was simple: notification of patent ownership and licensing requirements for Project Aura. The body of the email was brief. It formally stated that Nexus Innovations, LLC, was the sole and exclusive owner of U.S. patent numbers 11,345,812 and 11,345,956, covering the Corlocks modular system and the mycocrete composite material, respectively. It noted that these technologies were integral to the design proposed for the Viridian Global contract. It concluded by stating that any use, development, or replication of these patented systems would require a formal licensing agreement with Nexus Innovations, which would include significant royalty payments and mandatory lead designer and inventor credit for Spencer Montgomery on all public-facing materials. It ended with a simple, chilling line: "We look forward to discussing a potential licensing arrangement at your earliest convenience." I attached PDF copies of the official patent certificates. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the mouse. This was the point of no return. This was the quiet launch of a missile I had been building for months. I clicked send. The soft whooshus of the email, leaving my outbox, was the loudest sound in the room. Then silence. I didn't go to the office. I had already emailed my formal 2-sentence resignation to HR. "Please accept this as my formal resignation, effective immediately. I wish the firm all the best in its future endeavors." The polite, meaningless corporate sign-off felt like a final, ironic twist of the knife. For the first hour, nothing happened. The silence was unnerving. I imagined the email arriving, being opened by a junior assistant, perhaps flagged as spam. Then, at 9:17 a.m., my phone vibrated. It was a text from Maria. The email landed. A few minutes later, another text: "Your father just sprinted to the legal department. Have never seen him move that fast." The curtain was rising. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a play I had written, but was no longer a part of. I was the ghost in the machine now, the invisible hand turning the gears. Another text from Maria, at 9:45 a.m. "They've pulled the entire Aura team into the main conference room, the one they call the war room. Hayes is in there. He looks pale." I could picture it perfectly. The long, polished mahogany table, the solemn faces of the board members. My father at the head, his usual confident posture replaced by a rigid, furious tension. And Hayes, my brother, the management pedigree, sitting there, utterly useless, a deer in the headlights of a problem he couldn't solve by smiling or schmoozing. He was a captain who had been handed the helm of a ship, only to discover he didn't have the keys to the engine room. The real panic, however, wouldn't be happening at my father's firm. It would be happening at Viridian Global. Their multi-billion-dollar flagship project was now, legally, a house of cards. Their contractor had guaranteed them a specific revolutionary product that it now appeared they had no legal right to build. Their lawyers would not be panicked. They would be furious. They would be methodical. Around 11 a.m., my personal lawyer, Evelyn, called me. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the undercurrent of satisfaction. "Well, the first domino has fallen," she said. "I just received a call from Eleanor Vance's chief counsel at Viridian. They were direct. They invoked Section 12.4b of their contract with Montgomery Sterling, the capability and IP guarantee clause. They've given your father's firm 48 hours to provide absolute proof of their legal right to deliver the specified technology, or the contract is terminated for cause. 48 hours. It was a death sentence. There was no proof to provide. They were trapped. The texts from Maria became more frequent, a real-time feed of the meltdown. 1:20 p.m. Hayes is trying to lead a technical review. He's holding the schematics upside down. This is painful to watch. 2:05 p.m. They brought in the head of engineering. He's telling them the same thing you told me. The mycocrete is impossible to replicate quickly. He's estimating 18 minus 24 months for R&D. Your father looks like he's going to have an aneurysm. 3:30 p.m. They're talking about suing you. For what, I have no idea. Breach of loyalty, their own lawyers are telling them it's a non-starter. You developed it, you patented it, it's yours. The predictable, impotent rage of the powerful when they are suddenly rendered powerless. They were used to problems that could be solved with money or intimidation. This was a problem that could only be solved with a key, and I was the only one who had it. The most satisfying message from Maria came late in the afternoon. 4:45 p.m. They're trying to work around the patents. They're brainstorming alternative designs. Basically, they're trying to design a completely new eco-home from scratch in 2 days. Hayes just suggested using high-quality bamboo. I think the head of engineering is going to cry. They were flailing, trying to redesign a masterpiece with crayons and glue. The Aura home wasn't just a collection of parts, it was a holistic system. Changing the core components meant changing everything. The weight distribution, the energy modeling, the supply chain, the assembly logistics. They weren't just back at square one, they were in a different stadium altogether. That evening my phone finally rang with a number I recognized, my father's. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I ignored it. He called a third time. I silenced my phone. This wasn't a conversation to be had over the phone. This was a negotiation, and I would not be negotiating from a position of familial guilt. The silent takeover was nearly complete. I hadn't yelled, I hadn't threatened, I hadn't made a scene. I had simply stated a fact, politely and professionally. I owned the foundation, and without it their entire glittering castle was already starting to crumble. It wasn't about the money, I told myself again, as I looked at the email from Evelyn outlining a potential multi-million-dollar licensing deal. It was about the principle. But I had to admit, the principle was starting to look very, very profitable. The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate disintegration. The power shift wasn't a gradual slide, it was an avalanche. While my father's firm was scrambling to invent a new future in a single conference room, the real future was being decided elsewhere, in conversations I was now at the center of. The first tremor of the client exodus came the next morning. It wasn't a dramatic announcement, but a quiet, professional inquiry. Evelyn Reed called me. "Spencer, I've had a very interesting conversation," she said. "Eleanor Vance wants to meet with you. Not her lawyers, not her deputies. She wants to understand the technology from the source." The meeting was set for that afternoon at a neutral location, a private suite in a downtown hotel. Arthur insisted on coming with me, not as a negotiator, but as he put it, a visible reminder of what real engineering credibility looks like. When we walked in, Eleanor Vance was standing by the window, looking out over the city. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a sharp, intelligent face and an air of absolute no-nonsense authority. She dismissed her assistants with a wave of her hand. She turned to me, her eyes analytical. "Mr. Montgomery," she began, her voice crisp, "I've read your patents. Or rather, my technical team has read them and given me a summary I can understand. They tell me what you've designed is not just an improvement. They tell me it's a paradigm shift." "I believe it is," I said calmly. "My company, Viridian Global, has staked its reputation and $2 billion on a promise to deliver the next generation of housing," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "A promise based on that paradigm shift. Your father's firm assured us they could deliver it. It is now clear that was at best a misrepresentation. At worst it was fraud." She paused, letting the weight of the word hang in the air. "I'm not interested in lawsuits or recriminations. I'm interested in solutions. My question to you is simple. Can you deliver the Aura home?" This was the moment, the pivot point of my entire professional life. It wasn't just about my invention anymore. It was about my capability. "Miss Vance," I said, my voice steady, "I didn't just design the Aura home. I am the only person on the planet who knows how to build it. The designs your team saw are incomplete. The manufacturing processes are proprietary. The supply chain for the core materials answers to me." I looked over at Arthur, who gave a slow, deliberate nod. "But yes, with the right partners and the right resources, I can deliver it." Eleanor Vance studied my face for a long moment. I didn't flinch, I just met her gaze. I wasn't the talented designers anymore, I was the sovereign power in this room. Good, she said finally, a flicker of a smile on her lips. Because as of 10 o'clock this morning, Viridian Global has officially terminated its contract with Montgomery Sterling, citing material breach of contract and intellectual property misrepresentation. The words landed with the force of a physical impact. It was done. The biggest contract in my father's history had evaporated into thin air. My legal team will be in touch with Miss Reed to discuss a new development agreement, Eleanor continued, as if she were discussing the weather. Directly with your company, Nexus Innovations. We will fund the entire operation, startup costs, facilities, staffing, all of it. We are not just buying a design, Mr. Montgomery, we are investing in the designer. The news of the contract termination hit Montgomery Sterling like a shockwave. Maria's texts painted a picture of pure chaos. The board was in an emergency session. My father was apoplectic, and Hayes was apparently nowhere to be found. He had simply vanished from the office. That evening, the desperate counter-offensive I had been expecting finally came. My mother called, her voice strained with a forced cheerfulness, asking me to come to the family home for dinner. It was a transparent ambush. I politely declined. An hour later, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door, he looked diminished. The lion's roar was gone, replaced by a weary, haggard look. He tried to force a smile. Spencer, son, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said, not moving from the doorway. Don't be ridiculous, he snapped, a flash of his old arrogance returning. There's been a misunderstanding, a breakdown in communication. There was no misunderstanding, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. You stood on a stage and gave my life's work to my brother. You called me a talented designer. It was very clear. His face fell. He sagged against the doorframe. Okay, he sighed. Okay, I made a mistake. It was a political move. Hayes has the board's confidence. The investors like him. I was going to have you run the technical side. I was going to take care of you, take care of me. I almost laughed. I don't need you to take care of me. I needed you to give me the credit I earned. You chose pedigree over performance. And now, so has the client. He stared at me, his eyes pleading. Spencer, we can fix this. Come back. We'll give you whatever you want. The project lead. A vice presidency. Your name on the door next to mine. Anything. It was the offer I had dreamed of hearing my entire life. And now that it was here, it felt like dust. It was an offer made under duress, a desperate bid to reclaim a prize he had already lost. It had no value because it wasn't given freely. It had been extracted. It's too late for that, I said quietly. You can't offer me something that isn't yours to give anymore. Viridian is funding me directly. The color drained from his face. He finally understood. He hadn't just lost the contract, he had lost it to me. You did this, he whispered, his voice trembling with a rage born of impotence. You sabotaged your own family. No, I said, the cold truth settling between us. You did. You built a house on a foundation of lies, and you were surprised when it collapsed. I just owned the land it was built on. I closed the door, leaving him standing in the hallway. The power had not just shifted, it had been completely redefined. He was no longer the titan at the center of the universe. He was just a man who had made a bad bet, and I was no longer the son begging for scraps from the table. I was the one who owned the table, the chairs, and the whole damn restaurant. The final confrontation was not what I had expected. There was no shouting match, no dramatic boardroom showdown. It happened a week later, in the sterile, neutral territory of Evelyn Reed's office. My father had requested the meeting, a last-ditch attempt to negotiate a settlement, to salvage some piece of the wreckage. He and Hayes arrived together, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. My father's suit seemed too big for him now, his usual commanding presence replaced by a brittle defensive anger. Hayes was a ghost, his face pale and drawn, the smug charm completely gone, leaving only a hollow-eyed shell. I was there with Evelyn and Arthur. We sat on one side of a large mahogany table, they sat on the other. It felt less like a negotiation, and more like the signing of a surrender. My father's lawyer, a man I'd known my whole life, began with some blustering about trade secrets and employee loyalty, but Evelyn cut him off with a quiet, dismissive wave of her hand. "Let's dispense with the theatrics, Robert," she said, her voice like chipped ice. "Your client is in breach of contract with Viridian Global. They are facing potential legal action for misrepresentation, and they have zero claim to the intellectual property in question. We are not here to debate reality. We are here to discuss your client's orderly retreat." My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is obscene. He was my employee. He used my firm's resources." "Did he?" Arthur spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. "Did he use your firm's state-of-the-art materials lab?" "Oh wait, you shut that down in 2018 to expand the marketing department. Did he use the firm's senior engineering staff?" "No, most of them left after you pushed me out. He used his own brain, Alistair. On his own time. You just provided the office space. I doubt that entitles you to ownership of his soul." The words struck my father like a series of physical blows. He deflated, slumping back in his chair. Hayes just stared at the table, tracing the wood grain with his finger, a man completely out of his depth. I decided to end it. I looked directly at my father, not with anger, but with a strange, detached pity. "You said Hayes had the management pedigree," I said, my voice calm and even. "You said I was just a talented designer. You were half right. He doesn't have the pedigree to manage this. No one does, because it can't be managed. It has to be understood. And I'm not just a designer, I'm the architect of the home and of this situation." I leaned forward slightly. "This was never about revenge. It was a simple business proposition you failed to see. You had the most valuable asset in the industry, sitting in a closet in the back of your office, and you were so blinded by your own ideas of what a leader looks like that you couldn't recognize it. You didn't value the work, so you lost it. It's that simple." I stood up. "We're done here, Evelyn." My father looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, bewildered fear. "You're my son," he whispered, as if the words themselves were a magic spell that could reverse time. "You should have remembered that a week ago," I said. Then I turned and walked out of the room, Arthur and Evelyn following me. I didn't look back. The aftermath was swift and brutal. 2 weeks later, the industry trade publications ran the story. "Montgomery Sterling loses Viridian contract amidst IP dispute. Founder's son launches new firm with Viridian backing." The news sent shockwaves through the architectural world. The board of Montgomery Sterling, facing shareholder revolt and the public humiliation of losing their biggest ever contract to a startup run by the founder's other son, acted decisively. Alistair Montgomery was encouraged to take an immediate and permanent retirement. He was gone within a week. Hayes was demoted to an obscure role in international marketing, a corporate exile designed to make him so irrelevant he would eventually quit. My new reality began to take shape. Viridian Global was true to their word. They funded the creation of Nexus Innovations. We didn't lease a flashy downtown office. Arthur helped me find a massive abandoned warehouse in the city's old industrial district, a forgotten relic with high ceilings and incredible light. We spent the first month converting it into a state-of-the-art design lab and fabrication workshop. It smelled of sawdust, welding fumes, and potential. Maria was my first hire. She walked into my temporary office, dropped a cardboard box on the floor, and said, "My keycard for the old place stopped working this morning. When do I start?" She became my head of operations, her fierce loyalty and encyclopedic knowledge of the project making her indispensable. Arthur, refusing any official title or salary, served as our senior advisor, a constant source of wisdom and grumpy encouragement. We hired a small, dedicated team of engineers and designers, people who were passionate about the work, not the politics. 6 months after that fateful party, I stood in the main bay of our workshop. In front of me was the first completed prototype of the Aura home module, gleaming under the industrial lights. It was perfect. The mycocrete walls were smooth and strong, and the core lock system fit together with a satisfying near-silent click. It was real. It was mine. Eleanor Vance came to see it herself. She walked through the module, running her hand over the walls, peering at the joints. She was silent for a long time. Then she turned to me, a look of genuine admiration in her eyes. You did it, Mr. Montgomery, she said. You actually did it. Please, I said, a real smile touching my lips for what felt like the first time in years. Call me Spencer. My vindication wasn't a single moment. It was a slow, steady construction. It was the hum of the workshop, the camaraderie of my team, the respect of my client. It was the quiet satisfaction of building something true and lasting. In my new office, a simple space I built myself overlooking the workshop floor, I framed a single document and hung it on the wall. It wasn't the multi-billion-dollar contract from Veridian. It was a copy of the first patent certificate for Nexus Innovations. It wasn't a trophy of my victory over my father. It was the deed to my own life. A reminder that true ownership isn't about titles or applause. It's about having the courage to protect what you create and the vision to build your own foundation, even if you have to do it alone. So here we are, at the end of the story. Or maybe it's the beginning. I look at that patent on my wall every day. It's not a symbol of revenge for me. It's a symbol of sovereignty. It's a reminder that the most valuable thing you will ever possess is not the job title they give you, the salary they pay you, or the office they put you in. The most valuable thing you have is what is in your head and in your heart, your ideas, your skills, your integrity. This story, it might seem like it's about architecture, about patents and contracts. But it's not. It's about value. It's about understanding your own worth when the people who are supposed to recognize it the most are blind to it. For years I measured my worth by my father's approval. I was chasing a reflection in a mirror that was never going to show me what I wanted to see. The moment I stopped chasing his validation and started building my own foundation was the moment my life truly began. I'm talking to you now. To anyone who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased, anyone who has been called a talented assistant, a great support player, or a good helper, when you were the one with the vision, the plan, and the skill, do not wait for them to see you. They won't. Their validation is a prison, designed to keep you right where you are. Your power is not in the approval they grant you. It's in the work you do. It's in the skills you master in the quiet hours when no one is watching. Protect that work. Document it. Own it. Whether it's a patent, a portfolio, a client list, or just the undeniable proof of your own competence, build your own leverage. Because one day, a moment of crisis will come, and the world will suddenly be forced to see the difference between the people who have the titles and the people who have the talent. Be ready for that moment. My story is not unique. It happens every single day in offices and workshops all over the world. The names and industries change, but the dynamic is the same. If my journey, my struggle, my eventual victory means anything to you, if it gives you a spark of hope or a touch of resolve, then do me a favor, like this video, so that others who need to hear this message can find it. Leave a comment and share your own story of being underestimated. We can build a community of support right here. And please subscribe to the channel, because we all need to be reminded that you don't need someone else's name on the building when you have the blueprints to build your own world. Thank you for listening.